And way, way back, I'm going to say in the beginning of 2017, I wrote a piece called, or sometime in 2017, I wrote a piece called "The Resistance Needs Better Heroes." And the reason why I wrote it is because I thought that people were just idealizing folks like James Comey and Robert Mueller way too much on the liberal side of the spectrum, and that they were always going to let you down because they were not really people who had ever stood for a real change in the power structure as it exists. Let me just kind of remind myself, assuming you didn't read that piece, which was March. Oh, it's 2018. Okay, well, whenever. Okay, so I wrote it in 2018. One of the things that inspired me to write it was at that time in March of 2018, people were, when Mueller was appointed as special prosecutor, people were on the left side of the spectrum. Democrats, some of them, were treating this guy like he was going to be the rescuer in a movie. I pulled out some comments from social media about him at the time. Here's one quote: "Amen. Father, guide Mueller and his team in the right direction." Here's another, a quote first from Alexander Hamilton: "The greatest number have begun their career by paying an obsequious court to the people, commencing demagogues and ending tyrants." In other words, a quote against democracy by Alexander Hamilton, paired with "perimeter defense may not matter if the enemy is inside the gates. R. Mueller the third." So in other words, people were already hoping that Mueller would save us from, at least in this person's framing, democracy. Then there was this poem in honor of Mr. Mueller that was accompanied by a video clip of all things Dr. Martin Luther King. "Mueller is coming, Lady Justice is coming with him. I salute the men and women of the FBI. I salute the men and women of Mueller's team. I salute all these people defending America: IC, CIA, NSA, police, firemen, teachers, doctors, and nurses. I salute you for America." Now, Mueller was never really a safe place, Robert Mueller, to put all this hope and aspiration. He went along with George W. Bush's claim that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, which we now know was always false and was a charade and a fraud perpetrated on the American people. He was also challenged back in 2003 by Special Agent Colleen Rowley of the FBI, who became a whistleblower because Mueller also obligingly to the then president implied that there was a link between Iraq and Al-Qaeda, and allowed the FBI under his leadership to incorrectly state that there were 5,000 Al-Qaeda terrorist cells in the terrorists in the United States. So think about that. A guy who is willing to say there are weapons of mass destruction when they didn't exist and there was no evidence of them. A guy who was willing to imply there was a link with between Iraq and Al-Qaeda when there wasn't, leading to a needless and horrific war. And a guy who allows his organization to state that there were 5,000 Al-Qaeda terrorists in the U.S., creating a panic that would then encourage the kind of police state tactics we had following that war. He was never going to be a hero of anything resembling justice. Now people are he's issued a statement, obviously doesn't want to testify to Congress. It's saying, "I've said all I'm going to say." It's kind of a hologram. What you see depends on where you stand. If you hate Trump, there's enough in there to kind of please you. If you love Trump, you can ignore it, because he would never just come out and say what he wanted to say. But he also, in this statement, made it clear that a deal was cut one way or another before he even began his work. He says, under longstanding department policy, this is Mueller's statement, "A president cannot be charged with a federal crime while he is in office. That is unconstitutional." Now, the Constitution doesn't say that. The law doesn't say that. Congress never said that. That is just the Department of Justice's interpretation. But Mueller declares it constitutional. Even if the charge is kept under seal and hidden from public view, that too is prohibited. Again, just something that the Trump team has said. Therefore, charging the president was not an option we would consider. Now, MSNBC would have had you believe they were about to march, frog walk, march Trump or some of his people anyway, out of the White House at any moment. He made it clear he was never going to do it. He never intended to do it. If we want change, we are going to have to make that change ourselves.